Hey guys, welcome to Runeterra Library. My name is Excoundrel, and with my friend Orcs, we are basically creating this channel to do Runeterra guides. We are essentially looking to do tier lists for champions, we're doing deck guides, we're doing meta reports, everything that you need as a new player to get your head round Legends of Runeterra. That's what this channel is for. Now, obviously, it can be quite complex for new players. I always think of it somewhere between Hearthstone and Magic the Gathering. It's more complex than Hearthstone, but not as complex as Magic the Gathering. So it kind of like that sweet spot as a card game. Today are doing a champion tier list. You can already see the champion tier list. It's this way. You can already see the champion tier list on your screen already. For clarity's sake, and Dan will iterate on this a bit more, we are ranking these champions very specifically based on the power for their mana, so their stats for their mana and what they do, how they fit into decks, are they flexible, can they fit into multiple decks, and the power of the strongest deck on the ladder that is currently available for this particular champion. Obviously, there are decks out there that don't use any champions at all right now. There is a buff Ionia deck that's going around that's really strong, and that doesn't actually use any champions at all. But for new players, generally, you like to sort of build around champions. Decks often build around the mechanics of specific champions, and that's why we're doing this champion tier list. So I'm going to bring in Dan. Orcs, hello.
Hey. Hey.
How did you sort of the decision making process you kind of went through for creating this tier list specifically?
Well, I think you touched on it pretty well. I think again, it's the being able to fit into decks. There's some cards which are great and really powerful, and they're ranked a bit lower. I think Hecarim's a big example, and it's because there aren't very many decks you can fit in. There's some cards which are great, but you have to play around them. I think the S tier is very much cards you can fit in anywhere. So there's a lot of sort of thinking going behind this. Obviously, a lot of people may well disagree, but please let us know in the comments your opinions and which cards you think are maybe misplaced, or you think, yeah, that's exactly where I'd put it.
Sure. And obviously tier lists come down to opinions, so obviously sometimes those opinions will be different between players, but this is where we've kind of ended up after playing. Dan played a huge amount of the closed beta, and now through the open beta has been spamming it, and myself, I've been playing a lot as well. So this is where we're sitting with the current tier list. Now we're going to try and get through this as quickly as possible. We're going to go through our explanation now. If you just wanted to see the tier lists, this is what it is. This is what we've ranked it as. This is generally designed to help new players think about where to invest their legendary wildcards. Or if you have the shards available. Not many people do have the shards available to craft the champion, but if you do, maybe think about the champions to craft. We're going to try and update this whenever balance changes or meta shifts happen, because obviously things change as they do in card games in general. But this is what we're thinking of right now. So Dan, let's start off with S tier. Braum, Zed, and Elise, all decidedly in S tier, a cut above the rest. Why have we settled on this?
Big thing is they're all cheap cards. They're either 3 or 2 mana. They're all flexible in multiple decks, and yet they still have a deck that's really strong for them. I'd say for Elise, the best deck is Dawnspiders, which revolves around using the Dawnspeakers cards to buff all his spiders and basically having a constant stream of cards dying. For Braum, it's probably the Vlad Braum midrange, although he can fit in multiple stronger decks. And then for Zed, it's the Ephemeral deck with Hecarim. These cards are great components in those decks, but I feel like if you buy these, it's never going to be a bad investment unless they get nerfed in a later patch, because they fit into many decks. I mean, just their low cost and their ability to offer so much on the table.
Yeah, I think all of these decks are really good. And what we're going to do in the description below, guys, is we will link decks that correlate to some of these champions, so you can go and check out some of the decks. We will cover those decks in other videos more specifically with playthroughs of the decks themselves, but if you just want a deck list based on these champions, we will put it in the description below. Let's have a look at A tier then. Yasuo and Hecarim. Now, just for clarity's sake, Yasuo is my favorite champion. I think he's really cool, has one of the best designed effects in the game. I haven't actually had the chance to play much with Hecarim yet, but why have we gone for these guys in A tier?
I think these cards are incredibly strong, arguably maybe even stronger than the S tier, but the big limiting factor is both of these cards are very restricted to one deck. If you're playing Yasuo, it has to be a stun deck. If you're playing Hecarim, it has to be an ephemeral deck. These cards are very rigid in that term, and right now those decks are strong, but if they get nerfed, these cards could quickly fall out of favor.
Yeah, Yasuo's got one of the best level up effects in the game, I think, though. Just absolutely insane, just given the amount of like Noxian Ionian crossover you can get with all the stun cards and the recalls. Is I think Yasuo is incredible. But he, again, also they are quite expensive. If you look at the differences between a lot of our cards, like the S tier are just good for very low mana. The guys in A tier, they are quite expensive cards. Yes, they've got great stats for their mana most of the time. Yasuo kind of, but like they are quite expensive cards to throw down.
Yeah, I think as well is that the S tier cards, if they die, you can replace them, no problem. But Yasuo, you want to keep alive as long as possible. And Hecarim, it's just massively expensive. I think that's very much reflected in where we've ranked them.
Yeah, let's have a look at the B tier side of things then. Garen, Lucian, Ashe, Shen, and Darius. Let's break this up into 3 and 3. Garen, Lucian, and Ashe. They're in B tier.
Okay, so I think Ashe is pretty powerful in her effect. I think her effect and the way to level up is really easy and really effective. I think the problem is that a lot of decks at the moment are maybe a little bit fast paced for her. I think in the slower meta, you could get her going because in the previous patches, a lot of people were playing like control decks that put in cards like Tryndamere. But I think that she is a strong card enough itself. I think in a better meta, she'll be really powerful. I think Garen and Lucian are cards that you can fit in a sort of any deck. I like Lucian because he's cheap. His level up requirement is 4+ allies die, which is great with Ephemeral or Dawnspiders. But I think that you're not going to build a deck around him. But if you do level him up, he has some powerful abilities. Garen is just a strong card. He has one good deck, I'd say, that's built around him, which is Demacia Allegiance. Other than that, I'd say he fits into a lot just because, you put him down for 5 cost and he's powerful.
He's a 5 mana 5/5, like as just as basic as it gets in terms of mana to power ratio. Yeah, Garen's just there aren't many followers that are better than Garen for 5 cost just for pure stats. I can think of a few like the Shield Breaker that is slightly better, but yeah, he has that level up ability. So he's just obviously just a good body. I'd say Garen's like in my eyes just a good body, and because he has that elite allegiance, he can. You can get some synergy cards going there, but yeah, I think Garen is kind of just a good body. You're not going to win a game off Garen alone. His Judgment card is insane, but again, it costs 8 mana, so it's very expensive. He's just solid. Let's have a look at Shen, Darius, and Thresh then. Why are these guys down in B?
So I think Darius was pretty good with, there was a Noxus Allegiance deck, but it did get nerfed. I think he's a strong card for 6 cost. The fact that if the Nexus is lower than 10 HP, it's great to be able to upgrade him because he's so powerful. But I mean, other than that, the kill card, the Vengeance coming out from Shadow Isles would hard counter him. So that's a limiting factor, his expense as well. Shen and Thresh, I think, are powerful. Shen is great when in tandem with another strong unit like Fiora. Can really synergize well with that. And if you do level him up, it can sometimes be difficult because you have to keep him alive and see barriers 4 times, because if he dies, it does reset. But if you do level him up, it's really powerful and could just often win the game. Thresh, I feel like Thresh is a strong card. I think the fact he has Challenger, his 3/6, and his level up mechanic are all great. I think he doesn't have a great place in the current meta because he's good at resurrecting really powerful cards or bringing them into the fight. But I think that if the meta does shift, Thresh will start to show up a lot more in decks.
Yeah, I think Thresh is like a sleeper card for me. Like once people start to figure things out, I think Thresh could creep in very easily into quite a number of decks. I actually really like him as a design as well, and he's just got good stats for the mana cost. So I think anything with high HP as a champion is always good because it's much harder to kill them. I always prefer champions that have higher HP than attack, especially if they have an effect that you can work around, because often a lot of the time it's just about keeping that champion alive. So I think Thresh could creep up that tier list once we start to see maybe some more decks expand out. Having a look at C tier, Fiora, Tryndamere, Karma. Let's start with these guys. I think I know why Fiora is in C tier. She's a 3 mana 3/3, but her win condition revolves around her surviving and striking a lot of enemies, and that kind of limits what you can do with her.
Yeah, you may well have seen the Fiora Shen deck, which is you constantly bury the Fiora and get her to kill units. It is a strong deck. The problem is your main win condition until you get to, round 9 is usually the Fiora, and there's a lot of decks that can kill her off. They have tools to deal with it. And if she does die, all that progress is reset. Even if you've leveled her up, you still have to get 4 kills with the new Fiora. So it can be a pretty hard one to pull off, which is why I have dropped her quite low to C tier. I think Shen is a little bit more flexible, which is why he ranks above. I think next you mentioned Karma.
Mm-hmm.
Karma is a really fun card to play with. I really enjoy playing Karma when you get Enlightened. That is the big caveat. Enlightened round 10, a lot of decks will make it very difficult to get there. And I think that's the problem. Is Karma is probably one of the most potent one-turn kill cards because you can double the effective spells. I've seen some crazy impact with that. But again, you're waiting such a long time for it to be super relevant.
Yeah, I think any Enlightened cards right now, just in this current meta, like I think we need to put a caveat in that a lot of this is talking about the current meta. Enlightened cards in this current meta are difficult to make work because things like Dawnspiders and Ephemeral decks, they're just not going to let you get there. They're going to have the board full by round 5 or 6, just constantly attacking, and it's very difficult to get to round 10 a lot of the time. I think Karma, you know, in maybe more expedition side of things, because it's much easier to get to round 10 when you're playing expedition because decks aren't perfect. But yeah, for actual meta and climbing the ranks, I think Karma's kind of limited because it just takes so long, and then setting up her wombo combos take even longer than just getting to round 10, so it can be very difficult. And the problem with trying to have a champion alive this long, or keeping a champion until round 10 is that because there are so many challenger cards right now, like people can force attacks on enemies, they can force blocks, and that's just awful. Tryndamere also at sea. What are we thinking about with Tryndamere?
Expensive. I think that's the main thing. I think Tryndamere is a great card. There were some great decks with him in the previous iterations before they got nerfed. If you can get him out, great. But the problem is he's so expensive. And if he gets recalled or CC'd, he's really limited. If you stun him, if you frostbite him, you've essentially spent 8 mana on something to set on your board. He is powerful because if you kill him, he levels up and comes back even stronger. So that is a pretty strong factor. He was even better in the previous iterations because he got tough when he leveled up as well.
Wow, okay, yeah.
But again, current meta limits him heavily, and it's hard to get to the point of the game where you're playing him and you're not in a massively disadvantageous position.
And I think this whole meta talk kind of encompasses Teemo and Heimerdinger as well, because they are slow cards. Like, and with Challenger, Teemo just becomes useless a lot of the time because people can just drag him, even though he's elusive, people just drag him into block. So if you play Teemo, he's going to be vulnerable to, especially the Elise deck. Like the Elise deck just craps all over Teemo.
Yeah. And I think there's a great elusive deck at the moment, and it doesn't incorporate Teemo, and that's a problem. If you face up against that, they will just kill your Teemo, and all that setup, all that work is essentially going to waste. Especially since the big thing with the mushrooms is that like you have to get so many of them out for them to actually feel the damage early on. Because, you know, obviously at the start of the game, you have a lot of cards available. So even if you put 30 shrooms in their deck, you're only averaging 1 damage per round. A lot of decks can just take that.
Yeah, I mean, and a lot of decks will not mind waiting. I mean, Elise probably will never get to a point if her deck's getting to like round 15, she's probably already losing, right? So there's just a lot of decks that just will never go the distance, and Teemo will never be able to get the damage out. Even though he's a really fun card to play, it's just very difficult because of how fast the meta is. Heimerdinger is very similar as well. He's like a super late game level up. And as such, it's like he's just too slow. Just too slow right now.
Yep.
Vladimir and Jinx, we haven't touched on those guys. Vladimir and Jinx, what do you think about those guys?
Jinx has a nice discard deck, but again, it works well with Draven as one of the main ones. I think Jinx is a better component, but again, you're always going to be playing a discard deck with Jinx, and I think there's a lot of decks that get going a little bit faster and can deal with her, which is the limiting issue. I also think that as regards to quick attack cards, Zed is just better than Jinx. Vladimir, I think he has a really nice deck paired up with Braum, but I think his limiting factor is that he is so one-dimensional because you need cards that want to take damage or can take damage. So Braum works great because he wants to take damage and he's got regeneration. There's a couple of cards in Freylord, the Scar cards like Scarthane, Stethan, who they get damage whenever they get hit. They work great with Vladimir, but it's very restrictive. If you buy Vladimir, you're only playing one deck with him until things shift, because at the moment he's very sort of fixed in what he wants to do.
Yeah, I agree. Vladimir, I almost rated Vladimir higher than that just because of how powerful the Vladimir Braum deck can be. But I think Braum and a lot of the cards that synergize with what Vladimir does make Vladimir good, rather than Vladimir being a good individual champion himself. Right, down in the dumpster tier, almost dumpster tier. We've got the extra dumpster tier, but let's go to dumpster tier D. Draven, Katarina, Ezreal, and Kalista.
I think all these cards are pretty weak for what you get. Ezreal, again, you're going to struggle. He's an elusive card, but he takes even longer to get going than Teemo because to level him up, you have to target 8 enemy units. And they changed it so the Mystic Shot he creates costs mana. It used to be free, and he was a lot more powerful then, but really, he just doesn't have a place in the meta. Draven, he has that Jinx Draven deck, but that's really about it. I think as far as cards go, like Zed is just far better. Jinx is better. I don't think he's that powerful. Callista, they changed her completely, and they changed a lot of her aspects. And I think she's niche, but I think you have to play around her quite heavily to get her to work. And even then, I just don't think she's that good. I think maybe someone's going to come out with a deck with Callista. I think someone could work a mechanic to make a good deck, but right now I'm yet to see it. And Katarina, I think there are just better cards. I think there are just far better cards than Katarina. It's a cool mechanic to be able to strike and then recall and not get hit. But the problem is it's very much a hit and run strategy. And there are a lot of decks that they'll be able to soak that. You know, Dawnspiders will just put a spider up. You hit the spider, that levels up everyone else because of the Dawn Speakers. It gives them the +1/1. And then your Katarina's back in hand. So although she's only a 3 cost, every single time she attacks, she's going to recall. You have to pay that 3 cost again. And that's why, although she ends up being a lot more expensive than she looks.
I think people may figure out a way to make her upgraded version work at some point, because you can play her on your opponent's turn and you get rally and you can attack again. There may be a way that people think about making that work in the future, but I don't think anyone's quite figured out. I don't even think the recall part is the powerful part. I think it is that ability to level up very quickly and then get the rally part so you can continue to attack on your opponent's turn, because you can pay 3 mana every opponent's turn and still get an attack in, but you already have to be a strong point, like at a strong point on the board to be able to make that work. So yeah, I think until people figure out how to make that rally part of her work and build a deck that works really well with that, maybe a quick attack. I mean, there may be a quick attack focused deck, right? So you may be able to get a quick attack focused deck where you have followers with quick attack as well, and then you just rally on the opponent's turn and then just go in.
The one that's coming to my mind is an Ephemeral deck. I think that's the only thing I could think is where you have like Hecarim, and so you rally. Hecarim attacks. He summons his
dudes,
his Spectral Riders, and that will summon the Shark Chariot as well. And then they attack, and then you rally again, and then you have that again and again. And I think maybe that's the place where she could work. But I think, would I rather have a Katarina or a Zed in that deck? And yes. I think it's definitely a Zed.
Yeah, I think Zed functions much better. So yeah, Katarina may come in some point. Maybe they nerf her cost or buff her cost to 2 and then change the stats somewhere. But yeah, I think right now Katarina's just she's kind of like just an air card. Like she's just a bit air. I actually almost don't like the fact that she recalls. If she didn't recall, then she'd just be an okay quick attack card, right? But the fact that she recalls, just like me, it's like I've got to pay that mana every time I want to use her. So I'm basically paying 3 mana to deal damage to an enemy unit, which is just a bit.
All right, maybe if her initial version is she goes back to the bench and then when she's leveled up she recalls, that would be a better mechanic, because in the early game you don't want to. I mean, I guess that's only going to be 1 round. I think there's a lot of questions about this.
Every time she recalls, she reduces her mana cost, so that over the course of a few rounds, she eventually becomes free, and then you're like,
yeah, that's pretty broken, but they make it good.
or if she levels up, she goes to 2 mana, right, or something like that. Like they just need to find a way to make her like a little bit less expensive, because she's just quite expensive to play for what she does. All right, having a look at Lux and Anivia, the extra dumpster tier.
Yeah, Lux, super expensive. I mean, you're paying 6 mana for a card that's 3 power, 4 health. Yes, she comes with barrier, but there's a lot of cards that come with barrier. I mean, you can essentially place a cheaper card and then just put barrier on it, and you get the same thing. And her level up mechanic isn't that great. It's like once she levels up, nothing changes. Every time you spend 6 mana, you get a Final Spark. Her level up mechanic is the same as the upgrade mechanic. Every time you spend 6 mana, you get a Final Spark. And Final Spark isn't even that good. It's slightly better than Mystic Shot, and it's still free. But at least with Ezreal, you can place them early, which you can't do at Lux. And I think even if you level up the Lux, I don't think she insta-wins the game.
A lot of boards go wide as well right now. So even though you get Final Spark, it's like True Shot Barrage does more than Final Spark in a certain 1 turn sometimes. I think the problem is that because we have so many decks that like to go wide, that even when you get Final Spark, it's like, okay, I can kill 1, but like, okay, right now I'm killing a 2/2 spider. or something like that. It can be a bit
Yeah, and I think it's the fact that you have to spend so much mana to get another final spark, and then, I mean, honestly, like Karma is just infinitely better than Lux, and Karma's not even that good. I think that just shows how bad she is. And then next up is Anivia. Anivia got gutted. He got absolutely demolished in the changes because there was a really dominant deck, which was War Mother's Control, which was Anivia Tryndamere, and you play that card to just summon units. There was also a Thresh Anivia deck where you could summon multiple Anivias. She was really powerful, but they nerfed her power, they nerfed her health, they nerfed her cost, and they made it so she only revives if she's enlightened. And all these things for a 7 cost unit, she's almost unplayable. It's like if
yeah.
you're waiting to play it until you're enlightened, then by that point, you've probably already lost, or the other person has a deck which can deal with it. And then if you're playing it earlier, like I've seen people play Anivia round 7, and she has 4 health, so she dies, and then I just kill her egg because they have to wait another like 3 rounds for her egg to actually revive. It's terrible. I would never buy this champion until they completely change it.
Yeah, she is. She's in desperate need of some kind of rework, that's for sure. So that's the tier list, and I think if you are looking to use your wildcards, I think you can never really go wrong with Braum, Zed, and Elise right now. But if you want to go into some of the more specific decks, we will put links to some of the decks. I won't be able to put a link to a deck that includes every single champion, but I will put a link to some of the more popular decks that we've curated for some of these champions that you've got here. So if you want to look to build a deck around someone and start climbing the ladder, I would personally recommend Elise Dawnspiders. It's kind of just the easiest to play. It only requires 3 Elises, so you don't even need to have another champion to work with it. You can sometimes even do it with 2 Elises, but that's you're running a little bit of a risk there. But I think that's probably the easiest deck to play out of all of them. But we'll put some links to the descriptions in the description below. And if you disagree with the tier list, feel free to tell us why. I'd love to know why specifically. Also, if you have a link to a deck that you think works with a champion that makes it better, then feel free to throw that in the comments as well.
Yeah, and that's the thing is that I think a lot of these cards do have decks that make them work. I think it's just there's a lack of flexibility. So if you are spending your wild cards, the S tier ones are going to have multiple decks that work for them. But if you say, I really like that Jinx Draven discard deck, that's really fun to me, you will be able to play that and you will be able to do pretty well with it. It is a competitive deck. It's just if you then go, okay, I'm a little bit bored of this, you might be limited in what you can do with those 2 cards.
Absolutely. Right, thank you very much for watching our very first video, Legends of Runeterra Library. Can't even remember the name of our own channel because we have literally just made it. But yeah, this is our champion tier list. We're going to try and create some playthroughs of some of the more popular decks so you guys can figure out how they work, and we're going to talk about some of the replacements that you can have. I think Dan's working on the Vladimir Braum one, so that will be coming out soon. It's a very fun deck. So we will have some of those released in the next week, but enjoy, and we'll see you soon.
Cheers.